A young warrior once walked into the mountains to meet an old master. He had heard stories about him. Stories of wisdom, discipline, power. So when he found the master sitting beside a river, he spoke immediately. "Master, teach me how to become strong." The old man said nothing. The warrior spoke again. "I want discipline." Silence. He spoke again. "I want focus." Still silence. Hours passed. Nothing. Finally, angry and frustrated, the warrior shouted, "Why won't you answer me?" The old master looked at him and said, "Because your mind is too loud to hear truth." That sentence changed his life. And it might change yours too. Because most people today are mentally drowning. Not from lack of information, but from too much noise. Too much talking. Too much thinking. Too much reacting. Too much explaining. Too much distraction. And in all that noise, they lose power. Listen carefully. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your response. Not every situation deserves your energy. Strength is not found in endless reaction. Strength begins in silence. That is where clarity lives. That is where focus is born. That is where discipline sharpens itself. And yet, most people fear silence. Why? Because silence reveals truth. It exposes distraction, weakness, fear, unfinished work. And many would rather stay noisy than face themselves. But the Stoics understood something rare. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is preparation. And today, we're going to break down why your life keeps feeling scattered. And how silence can rebuild your mind. Stay until the end. Because the final lesson may completely change the way you think about focus. And if you're serious about mastering yourself, subscribe to the Stoic Path. Because here, we train the mind, sharpen discipline, and build quiet strength. Let's begin. Lesson 1: Stop talking so much. Most people talk too much. Not because they have wisdom, but because silence makes them uncomfortable. They fill space with unnecessary words, explanations, complaints, opinions, noise. And every careless word drains power. A wise man once said, "The mouth leaks the energy the mind should protect." Think deeply about that. How much energy have you wasted explaining yourself? Arguing? Defending? Complaining? Talking about goals instead of building them? There was once a man who told everyone about his plans. His business idea. His future success. His dreams. Everywhere he went, he talked about it. But years later, nothing was built. Only words. And one day, an old friend told him, "You have spoken your dreams so many times that your mind mistakes talking for progress." Painful. But true. Talking creates false satisfaction. Action creates real progress. That is why Stoics moved quietly. Worked quietly. Built quietly. Because noise often replaces effort. And effort changes life. There is power in saying less. Observe more. Speak less. Build more. Your results should speak louder than your mouth. Lesson 2: Stop overthinking. Overthinking feels productive. But often, it is disguised fear. A person says, "I'm just making sure." No. Often they are delaying. Escaping. Avoiding action. There was once a man standing before a bridge. He needed to cross. But he kept analyzing. What if the wood breaks? What if I fall? What if the river is deeper than it looks? Hours passed. Then another traveler arrived. Tested the bridge. And crossed. The first man remained there. Not because the bridge was dangerous. Because thought had trapped him. This is modern life. Too much thinking. Too little doing. The mind becomes a prison. And prisons destroy focus. Listen. You do not think your way into discipline. You act your way into it. Thought is useful. But endless thought is paralysis. A Stoic asks. What can I control right now? And acts. That is power. Because action cuts through fear. Action cuts through doubt. Action cuts through confusion. And clarity often comes after movement. Not before it. Lesson 3, Focus is a weapon. Focus is rare. And rarity creates power. A distracted person is weak. Not because they lack talent. But because their energy is divided. Imagine sunlight. Scattered. It warms. Focused. It burns. That is your mind. Scattered by social media. By opinions. By comparison. By entertainment. By endless thought. And then you wonder why life feels heavy. Because scattered energy creates weak results. There was once an archer training under a master. The master placed a fruit on a distant tree. He asked, "What do you see?" The student said, "The tree. The sky. The leaves." The master shook his head. Then he asked another student. The student replied, "I only see the fruit." The master smiled. That student hit the target. That is focus. Seeing only what matters. And ignoring what doesn't. That is how lives are transformed. Not by doing everything. By doing what matters. Deeply. Repeatedly. Without distraction. Lesson 4, Silence builds power. Silence is uncomfortable for many. But silence builds something noise cannot. Awareness. When you sit in silence, you hear your patterns. Your fears. Your habits. Your truth. There was once a king who asked his advisor, "What makes a man wise?" The advisor replied, "His ability to sit with himself without needing escape." Powerful. Can you sit alone? Without reaching for your phone? Without needing noise? Without distraction? That answer reveals your relationship with yourself. Silence strengthens self-awareness. And self-awareness strengthens focus. Because once you see yourself clearly, you can change clearly. Most people remain weak because they remain distracted. And distraction hides truth. Silence reveals it. A warrior sharpens his blade in silence. Not in noise. Why? Because silence allows precision. And precision creates power. Your life needs silence. Not as escape. As an NBSP, training. Now let's go deeper. Because silence is not just the absence of noise. Silence is the training ground of power. And most people never stay there long enough to understand it. Why? Because silence is uncomfortable. It removes distraction. It removes escape. It removes performance. And when all of that disappears, you meet yourself. Your fears. Your weaknesses. Your unfinished work. Your truth. That is why many people fear silence. Not because silence is empty. But because silence is revealing. There was once a man who lived in constant noise. Music always playing. Phone always active. Television always on. Friends always around. He said he hated silence. One day, during a storm, the electricity went out. No sound. No noise. No distraction. And for the first time, he sat with his thoughts. At first, it felt unbearable. Then something happened. He realized his mind had been screaming for years. But noise had covered it. That night changed him. Because in silence, truth speaks. And truth changes everything. That brings us to the next lesson. Silence sharpens awareness. Most people do not notice life. They rush through it. Talking. Thinking. Reacting. Missing everything. But silence slows perception. It makes you see. Hear. Understand. There was a hunter in the forest. His student walked loudly. Talking constantly. Breaking branches. Scaring away everything. The hunter stopped him and said, "The forest only reveals itself to the silent. That is life. Life reveals itself to the quiet. Patterns. Truths. Intentions. Energy. When you are always speaking, you miss what others reveal. People expose themselves when you stay silent. Their motives. Their insecurities. Their character. Silence teaches observation. And observation builds wisdom. A Stoic does not rush to speak. He studies first. Because the person who sees clearly moves wisely. And wise movement beats impulsive movement every time. Overthinking is hidden cowardice. This may sound harsh. But it is true. Overthinking often looks intelligent. But many times, it is fear. Fear disguised as preparation. Fear disguised as analysis. Fear disguised as caution. A man stood before a door for years. On the other side was opportunity. Growth. Change. But he kept thinking. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? What if it goes wrong? And while he thought, life moved. One day he looked back. And years were gone. Not because he lacked opportunity. Because he lacked courage. That is what overthinking does. It delays life. It steals time. It weakens action. A Stoic understands. You do not think your way into courage. You act your way into courage. Action teaches what thought never can. The strongest people are not always the smartest. They are often the ones who moved. While others were still thinking. Think less. Act more. That is strength. Focus is the highest form of discipline. A distracted mind is a weak mind. Not because it lacks intelligence. Because it lacks direction. Focus is power concentrated. Like sunlight through a magnifying glass. Scattered light warms. Focused light burns. That is your mind. There was a young blacksmith learning his craft. Every strike was weak. Scattered. Impatient. His master told him. Strike one point. Not everywhere. At first, the student didn't understand. But over time, he saw the truth. Strength is not about more force. It is about directed force. That applies to life. Many people fail because their energy is scattered. Too many goals. Too many distractions. Too many opinions. Too many escapes. And divided energy creates divided results. Choose one thing. Focus. Stay there. Build there. Grow there. That is how mastery is born. Not through variety. Through devotion. Stop explaining yourself. This is powerful. Because many people waste energy explaining themselves. Their choices. Their boundaries. Their path. Why? Because they want approval. But approval is expensive. It costs peace. A lion does not explain why it walks alone. It simply walks. There was a young man who decided to change his life. He stopped partying. Stopped wasting time. Stopped chasing empty pleasure. His friends mocked him. And for months, he kept explaining. Defending himself. Trying to make them understand. Then his grandfather told him. If your path is clear to you, it does not need to be clear to everyone. That changed him. And it should change you. Silence protects purpose. Results speak louder than explanations. Let your discipline speak. Not your mouth. Strength is built in solitude. The world fears solitude. Because solitude removes distraction. But solitude is where strength is forged. There was once a warrior who trained alone in the mountains. No applause. No audience. No praise. Just discipline. Years later, when battle came, he was ready. Because strength had been built in silence. That is how real strength works. Privately. Quietly. Without attention. Most people only work hard when others are watching. That is weakness. Work when nobody sees. Grow when nobody praises. Build when nobody believes. Because what is built in silence cannot be easily broken. Solitude reveals your habits. Your weaknesses. Your truth. Use it. Do not fear it. Silence protects your energy. Words cost energy. Arguments cost energy. Drama costs energy. And many people are exhausted. Not from work. But from unnecessary noise. A wise old man lived in a village. People constantly came to argue. Complain. Pull him into drama. Most times. He simply smiled. And said nothing. Someone asked him why. He replied. Not every fire deserves my wood. Powerful. Because every argument you enter feeds something. And often, it feeds chaos. Protect your energy. Not every opinion deserves your response. Not every insult deserves your attention. Silence is protection. And protection preserves power. Action ends inner conflict. The mind creates storms. Doubt. Fear. Confusion. But action calms the storm. A young writer spent years saying, "One day I'll write." Thinking. Planning. Dreaming. But never starting. One day his mentor told him, "The page fears action less than you do." So he started. And the fear weakened. That is how action works. It shrinks fear. It clarifies confusion. It builds momentum. The longer you wait, the heavier it feels. Move. Even imperfectly. Movement creates clarity. Stillness creates overthinking. A stoic moves with intention. Not endlessly thinking. Not endlessly speaking. Moving. That is strength. And here is the truth. Your future is not built by what you say. Or even what you think. It is built by what you focus on daily. Daily. That word matters. A man who trains once cannot claim discipline. A man who trains daily, even imperfectly, builds strength. The same with focus. Protect it daily. Guard it daily. Use it wisely. Because where focus goes, life follows. And if this message is sharpening your mind, subscribe to the Stoic Path. Because here, we do not chase noise. We train silence, discipline, focus, and inner strength. Remember this. Stop talking. Not forever. But enough to hear yourself. Stop thinking. Not completely. But enough to stop fear from controlling action. And start focusing. Because true strength, real strength, begins in silence. Not in noise. Not in performance. Not in endless words. Silence. Focus. Action. That is the Stoic path. And that path changes everything. Now listen carefully. Because this is where most people lose their power. Not in failure. Not in pain. Not in hardship. But in distraction. Distraction is the silent thief of destiny. It does not attack loudly. It whispers. Check your phone. Rest a little. Start tomorrow. Watch one more video. And little by little, your focus is stolen. Your time is stolen. Your life is stolen. There was once a young man with extraordinary talent. Everyone believed he would become great. But he chased everything. Every trend. Every pleasure. Every distraction. And years later, he was still potential. That is one of the saddest things in life. Potential without discipline. Potential without focus. Potential without action. Because potential means nothing without direction. A river becomes powerful because it stays in its path. But if it spreads everywhere, it weakens. That is your mind. Scattered. Weak. Focused. Dangerous. That is why Stoics protected their attention. Because attention is life. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Your mind is a battlefield. Every day, you are at war. Not with people. Not with life. With yourself. Your higher self. Against your lower self. One wants discipline. The other wants comfort. One wants growth. The other wants escape. One wants silence. The other wants noise. And every choice strengthens one side. A warrior once asked his master, "How do I become stronger?" The master replied, "Feed the stronger wolf." The student asked, "Which wolf is stronger?" The master said, "The one you feed." Simple. Brutal. True. What are you feeding? Focus? Or distraction? Silence? Or noise? Action? Or excuses? Because what you feed grows. And what grows controls you. This is why your daily habits matter. They are votes. Votes for the person you are becoming. Every distraction is a vote for weakness. Every act of focus is a vote for strength. Choose carefully. The world rewards quiet builders. Look around. Growth always looks strange to people who remain the same. Accept that. Do not explain your evolution. Live it. Let silence carry it. Master the pause. This is a secret weapon. The pause. Before reacting. Before speaking. Before deciding. Pause. A pause creates power. It creates space between emotion and action. And in that space, wisdom enters. A king once received terrible news. His advisors expected panic. Reaction. Chaos. But the king paused. Walked to the window. Breathed. Thought. And only then spoke. His calm saved the kingdom. Because panic spreads. But calm stabilizes. The pause protects wisdom. Use it. When angry. Pause. When hurt. Pause. When tempted. Pause. That pause can save your life. Because many regrets are born in speed. But wisdom lives in stillness. The strongest person controls himself. Not others. Himself. That is stoicism. People waste years trying to control life. Control outcomes. Control people. But the Stoic controls himself. His tongue. His thoughts. His focus. His reactions. That is true strength. A man once conquered many lands. But his teacher told him, "You have conquered the world. But not yourself." And what is the value of that? If anger controls you, you are weak. If distraction controls you, you are weak. If comfort controls you, you are weak. Freedom begins with self-mastery. And self-mastery begins in silence. Because silence reveals what controls you. And once revealed, it can be conquered. Your life changes the moment you focus. Not someday. The moment. Because focus changes action. Action changes habits. Habits change identity. Identity changes destiny. That is how transformation works. Quietly. Slowly. Powerfully. A sculptor was once asked, "How do you create something beautiful?" He replied, "I remove everything that doesn't belong." That is your work. Remove noise. Remove distraction. Remove unnecessary talking. Remove overthinking. Remove chaos. And what remains is power, clarity, purpose, focus. The real you. And that version of you is stronger than you know. If this message awakens something in you, subscribe to the Stoic path. Because this path is not for everyone. It is for those willing to master themselves. To build in silence. To grow in discipline. To focus when others are distracted. Remember. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The strongest person is often silent. Watching. Thinking clearly. Acting precisely. Building quietly. So. Stop talking. Stop overthinking. And start focusing. Because true strength, the kind that changes your life, begins in silence. And silence is where warriors are made.